place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Thursday, January 30th, 2025, and this is episode 997 of Living Free in Tennessee. We're going to hit episode 1,000 next week, guys. I'm kind of excited, and I planned absolutely nothing to celebrate. I got nothing queued up, so it's on you guys if you want to celebrate the 1,000th episode of Living Free in Tennessee. Today is a Monday show on a Thursday. I underestimated how much time it would take and energy to take care of somebody for her first week after having a knee replacement. Mom was a good patient, but there was just a lot of ongoing constant things. And so I ended up prioritizing going to the pool and swimming laps once a day over doing podcasts. So we are back with a Monday show today. We will have our usual Homestead Happenings show tomorrow at 12:30. And today, as you can see, I am live streaming from my kitchen. Why? Because I also got home with a backlog of work to do and a backlog of homesteading things to do. And I thought, while we do the show today, I can also do some catch up on homesteading things. And today we're talking about starting seeds. And guess what I'm going to do while we're talking? I'm going to start seeds, although I'm not going to start these seeds, which are Brad's Atomic Grape tomatoes. I always try a new fun tomato every year, and this is the one I'm trying this time. This is a giant packet, and there's maybe 5 seeds in this little corner. I don't even know. They're tiny. Oh, no, there's probably, I would guess, 25 seeds in here. But I'll get these started, and later in the year, if I do well with my seedlings, I'll probably have some of these for sale, the extras, because I only want like 2 of these plants for the garden. We're going to talk about success with starting seeds. So if this is your first year, I'll have tips for the beginner, but I'm also going to share with you, since the first time I did a show like this, how I've changed how I do seeds, because it has changed. That was almost 10 years ago that we did our first episode on starting seeds. Some things haven't changed, and a lot of things have changed, particularly how I'm integrating local soil biology into the seed start process, and how you can do it as a beginner or how you can do it as a more advanced person. Before I do that, I want to talk about our featured event of today's show, and that's the Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop, which is April 24, 25, and 26. That's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now, people usually arrive on Wednesday and set up their camps or come say hi and go stay at a local Airbnb or condo over at Edgar Evans State Park. And we usually have hamburgers and brats and stuff like that on that first day. And then we do, hello, Joe, welcome to the live stream. We do a bunch of sessions on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Saturday night people hang out, and departure is on Sunday. The tickets are going to be $600 this year. I am sorry. I've tried to keep the cost down, and this is the first time I've raised prices in a long time. Just all overall costs have gone up, and we ask for a $200 deposit at your time of registration. I'm going to open up tickets on Saturday at 9 a.m. The link will show up at livingfreeintennessee.com. If you want to read more about the spring workshop, you can go to livingfreeintennessee.com, and in the upper navigation or on your phone in like that burger menu, you'll see spring workshop, and it's got information there about who's speaking. But let me tell you, I printed it out today so you could hear who's going to be there. First of all, Alan Booker, who, if you've been to Self-Reliance Festival, he did the Self-Reliant Kitchen, and then also he's done some work on epigenetics and shared that with us in a way that makes sense to those of us who are not PhD scientists, right? He's a great presenter. He teaches one of the most raved about PDCs I've heard about nationally. He's working with Billy Bond in North Carolina to do soil remediation, to repair the soil after all the toxins got into it in the flooding that happened this year. He's going to do 2 very long sessions. They are 2.5 hours long. He told me he plans to do like 1 session break, second session on topics that are permaculture related. And one of the things I know he's going to cover is how to assess your property with the permanent structures that are there and that sort of thing to get started towards a usable permaculture plan on your property. But there is so much more he can dive into. I'm sure he's going to cover some things on genetics and epigenetics, and it's going to be Well, like drinking from a fire hose. Although when I told him how much time I'd given him, he's like, finally, Nicole, you've given me enough time to actually get something done here. I was like, that's why I gave you these 2.5 hour sessions. And then we're going to have Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast. He's going to walk us through building the bioreactor compost pile. We're going to do one hands-on here, as well as biochar. He'll be on hand for the brainstorming session. I'm going to facilitate this. We're going to do a function stacking brainstorming session on all the uses and functions we can build into a design of a greenhouse to go over my swim spa, because my swim spa releases heat and humidity, which is great for a greenhouse. I want to have it covered so I don't get snowed on when I'm swimming, but I also want to have it open in the summertime because it's kind of nice to have a breeze when you're swimming in a 98-degree day, right? Well, there's a lot of ideas that have already come our way on how else we can do this with some natural building methods. Maybe we can use the plants to filter the water in the swim spa and a lot of other ideas. We're going to do a session about that. John, welcome to the live stream. I'm going to do a session, lessons learned after 3 years of raising sheep regeneratively. Emily Zanotti, who you may not have heard from, but you should totally check her out if you haven't. Emily Zanotti is a friend of mine from the public policy years, and she was somebody I worked with, gosh, back in the day. She's a lawyer by training, but what she turned into was a public policy commentator. She started a blog. She's helped people learn how to use social media to promote themselves. She also lives in Nashville and has turned her yard into an urban homestead. So she's raising her kids there, working, and also homesteading. She's going to share all about urban homesteading, or as she calls it, I think, what does she call it? Blah, 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 blah. Urban homestead activism or urban food activism. Anyway, she's talking about how she's going against the grain and raising her own food. And I think you'll really love that session. Dawn Gorham will be in and talk about how she has transformed her homestead into a homestead business to make money. Tactical Redneck's going to give us a tour of the erosion remediation projects he's been working on here for a couple of years. And he'll talk about what it was like, how he has slowed water to build more soil on my homestead. Joel Riles will be here to talk about problem solving and planning for success, which is a lot of insights he's drawn from his first very rapid move from Florida to Ohio and then rebuilding his dog business there and there's always setbacks in something like that. So he's going to talk about how to build resilience through that sort of a situation. Then Harry Albright is going to do a hands-on cage building project where you learn how to build cages without putting a bunch of holes in your hands, which anybody who's built wire cages knows that it can be very frustrating and you can poke yourself a lot. I've got Jenny Hill doing somatic movement and breath work. Mama Sauce will probably be on site, and she plans to do a knitting session. John Pugliano of the Wealth Studying Podcast will do Permaculture Your Wealth, so turning your wealth into generational wealth with permaculture practices. Carrie Brown's going to talk about how to plan your property to be off-grid because he built his off-grid homestead on family land. So like technically there are some services elsewhere on the property, but where he wanted to build, he decided to go off-grid because there was no point in tapping into like spending all the money to do that when they could just build an off-grid homestead. So he's going to talk about that. And Patrick Rohrman is going to talk about accomplishing anything, how I transformed raw land into a family headquarters. So that's all of the sessions that we have queued up for the Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop. It is 3 fun days filled with great food. We make the food from things that we've grown here. We source in the network as much as possible. 3 meals a day, revelry at evening, camping is included, and I can also hook you up with some great links to different places to stay if you prefer to have a place with a shower. I do have an outdoor shower here. We use composting outhouses during the event. There's ways to wash your hands and that sort of thing. And the classroom is in a basement I've converted into a classroom, so it's heated and cooled, which really helps when we have classroom sessions that we're not sitting around and it's 90 degrees or we're sitting around and it's 30 degrees, which in April, you just don't know. That's April 24, 25, 26. Tickets go on sale, $200 deposit at livingfreeintennessee.com, 9 a.m. on Saturday, and it's going to be a really fun time. With that, I want to thank also our two sponsors of today's show. The first sponsor is John Pugliano of the Wealth Studying Podcast. John does a great podcast where he does approximately once a week an episode, although not every week. They're about 15 minutes long, and he talks about how global events are impacting his investment decisions, how the market isn't informing his investment decisions, and shares what he's doing. It's a great podcast, very digestible. If you're totally new to investing, it's great because you'll start learning your chops so that when you're ready to invest, you have a better foundation for that. But also, if you are an investor, he gives you insights because he does not let emotion inform how he makes investment decisions. He just does a global analysis. Check it out at investablewealth.com. If you navigate to podcast on the menu, you can start downloading episodes there, or you can download them on any podcatcher on your phone. Our second sponsor of today's show is EMP Shield. EMP Shield makes a whole house protection device, or whole camper, or whole car, or whole solar system that protects you from unpredictable things that happen with your power. Like, oh, I don't know, a tree falling on the transformer right outside your house, or water pouring down the conduit from the weatherhead to your breaker box, causing surges in power, and then boom, it blows, and not all of the stuff in your house. They include a $25,000 replacement plan if for some reason their device misfires or doesn't work. And if you need to use your EMP Shield because, I don't know, lightning struck or something, and the device is ruined, you can send the device in and replace it for only $50. Pretty cool add-ons that they have. When my electrician installed mine, he said, now I understand why you're getting these. This is the best device of this kind I've seen. Check it out, empshield.com. If you want $50 off, use the coupon code LFTN. It's time for our first segment of today's show, and that's Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And I will say this, I've been gone for a week because Mama Sauce had a knee replacement. So I was not operating from my pantry, but you know who was? Tactical Redneck, who was responsible for feeding himself while I was gone, tapped into what was there. And what I had started doing in sort of December and into the Christmas break was every time I cooked something like meatballs or that was something that I could do in bulk, I would cook 2 to 3 times as much or prepare it and not cook it and put something in the freezer so that there were easy to cook meals ready to go. I came home to this pile of freezer containers in my sink. And so that worked really well, including dinner last night. I got back after flying and was able to cook something without too much effort because, after you fly, you're tired, right? So that's worked really well. And that double and triple cooking habits are a really good thing to build into your life. You can do it like once a week. It's Sunday dinner. I'm making roast beef for Sunday dinner. I have 2 roasts in the freezer, so I'll get one prepared for the future, a roast future, and I'll cook the roast that I'm preparing, and then boom, you're good to go. That's just an example. Or you make 2 meatloaves when you make 1 meatloaf, or you make twice the number of hamburger patties if you're making burgers. It's sometimes hard to wrap your head around doing that, but if you do it consistently about once a week, you end up with a decent backlog of easy meals, and then that saves you from buying convenience meals like a pizza to reheat at home or whatever. And then that saves you from A, the nutritional deficiencies of that, and B, you save money because you're using the food that you have on hand with raw ingredients as opposed to processed foods. Now, I'm not saying I don't buy a pizza from time to time, right, when I choose to, but I try to make it so I don't have to, right? Because there's always things that come up that make your life super busy. Okay. Looking to skim coat the concrete in the Prepper Pantry redo. That's where we're at this point. I was really thankful Ryan Steva came and made sure all the insulation was in before we plunged to 5 degrees. So now the concrete that was installed is sort of bumpy, like they didn't totally flatten it out. So we're going to skim coat it. We're not leveling it completely, but just making it so it's smooth. And to do that, I need to move all the freezers to one side and do half of it, and then move all the freezers to the other side to do the other half. So my goal is to, in the next week, get at least half of it done and starting to cure. I don't know how long it will need to cure before I put freezers on the other side. So that's going to be sort of playing that by ear. Once that's done, We're going to redo how the utilities are in there just from an organization standpoint. And then finally, we can put the walls in. And then when the walls are in, I can finally put my stuff back in the prepper pantry, which is going to make my life a whole lot easier from organizing things and just keeping up on my system, my power pantry method of using the oldest first and keeping that pantry savings account of stuff or time between, if I have 6 months of green beans canned, then that's a 6-month savings account where I don't have to buy green beans, right? But that doesn't necessarily work if you don't have somewhere to put them. And I've learned that lesson to my core. And next time I do the Power Pantry webinar series, yeah, we're going to make sure I integrate even more tips on how you can store stuff without losing your mind in small spaces, because I've got a lot more experience of that. I'm also refining what we store here, just because I've stored a lot of things for other people who come here, and they're coming here less often. And so really refining it down to the people in our community immediately. Next segment is the frugality tips section, where you all share your frugality tips, ways that you're saving money. I don't have one this week. I'm only bringing it up because if you want to get one in, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com is how you get it in. And you could be on next week's show if you share ways that you think of to save money and that are things we can build into our lives. Finally, Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our world here. Today, Tactical is off-site already, picking up the processed lambs that we sold last fall. So he's picking those up, and then we'll be connecting people who bought their lambs with their meat. And that's the first, like, I've sold them before, but this is the first official cycle where the lambs that were born on the property are the ones that we are selling, right? The first batch, when we bought the flock, there were like 11 boys or something. It was a lot. And we had to reduce ram count, so we sold them. These guys were processed at 9 months, which was my goal. They were about 95 pounds on average on the hoof, and they will be meat in people's freezers. My next round of lambs will be being processed in October, and I have about 4 of the 10 left that are being processed. If you want to grab one, head over to livingfreeintennessee.com and get your deposit in for a half or whole lamb. With that, it's time for the main topic of today's show, and that's starting seeds. And while we do this show, I'm also going to start seeds. Now, years ago, I did this show, and Dory, I don't know if you remember Dory, 40 Acres in a Cave Dory, started her seeds and ended up with tons of seedlings and a really successful garden. And she had been a little hesitant to start plants from seeds. So I'm going to start out with this. If this is your first year gardening, or if you've never done it before, the only way to get good at starting things from seed is to start things from seeds. And the way our economy works right now, if you start your seeds now and they fail, you're still going to be able to buy seedlings from our community or from nursery stores or even Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart in time to plant your garden with those seedlings. So a lot of times the advice is don't start seedlings, because your starting seedling process is one set of skills and keeping things alive in your garden is another set of skills. And I used to give that advice. And now I say, go ahead and choose a couple of things you want to start from seed, give her a go. And if you fail, whatever, you can buy plants. And then, learn how to garden. You need to keep those plants alive. So the key to seedling, so the first time I ever started from seed, I got some of those little peat pods and a little plastic with a plastic top greenhousey thing. It was like a little mini thing about 4 inches tall. I put seeds in it. I put it on a windowsill. They germinated. Half of them died. The other half lived. They got really leggy, and I transplanted them, and I ended up with vegetables. So it may not have been a resounding success, but it worked. The things I've learned since then is if you cover these 4 areas, you're going to have better success. And the first one is light. Light from my windowsill is not enough to keep the plants from getting leggy, especially at this time of year. By adding artificial light, you can reduce how leggy they are. 2, soil temperature matters. On my windowsill back then, It was inside, so it was warmer, so that was better, right? And then the plastic cover of that little greenhouse thing with the little pods, it made it like kept some of the warmth in, but it was still with a single pane window, it was a variable temperature, so a little bit less stable. So when you can take control of your temperature a little bit better and have it a little bit more stable and in the right range, you're going to have more success. Consistent moisture, that's number 3. That I did wrong a lot that year because those little peat pods, if they get dry, they become hydrophobic. And then when you water them, they don't absorb the water, but they're in a tray that you can put water in and eventually they do catch back up. But the rootlets of the tiny little plants don't like to get dry. And going to work during the day and coming back, sometimes they would drink all of the water. And so a couple of times my plants dried out, including killing them a couple of times. Katrina says, I've been starting my plants from seeds for years and I still feel like a failure every time until they sprout, meaning I'm impatient. Yeah, there is that. There is that. Every so often, I just get a pack of something that doesn't germinate, Katrina. It is what it is. That's why your backup plan is source locally, right? That's the way it is. And then potting soil and soil biology can really help you. So those little peat pods are great and they will start your plants, but they don't have any life in them. And so if you're able to improve the quality of your soil over time that you're using for seed starts, you're going to be in a much better place. So those are the 4 things. So I'm going to go back. So light. A window isn't going to cut it. This is the number 1 reason I see people fail is that the plants, when you plant them, get leggy. And while I do this, guys, I'm actually going to start planting my seedlings because come to think of it, I've got all this beautiful soil back here and I've got supplies, so I might as well just do something with my hands while I talk to you. Anyway, so back in that day, it was sad and the plants got leggy. And the good news is if you have this happen with a tomato or a pepper, you can just transplant the thing and put it in soil higher up on the stem and it'll do fine. Not all plants respond well to that. So if you get leggy plants, or if you can't have supplemental light, you can plan for leggy plants by putting the seed further down in the soil, making sure it's in the lightest area possible, even using like a desk lamp or something to get a little bit more light there. And you'll see them like reach towards the light and then start building soil up as they get leggy, and whatever happens, happens. What's the worst that can happen? You got to go to Home Depot and buy your Swiss chard there instead of, ooh, that has an interesting little spider nest in it. Anyway, buy your Swiss chard there instead of somewhere else. But if you can get full spectrum grow lights and have them, gosh, I'm going to use one of these. Like pretend this tray is a light, have them that, oh, you can't see, that close to your pots, like just almost right down up on there. Your plants will grow thicker stems and they will grow slower. Another way to help them thicken out their stems is to have a fan on them, but that can dry them out. So you need to keep an eye on the moisture at that point. You end up putting your lights uncomfortably close to the seedlings. Now, Barina makes some lights, and I'll have links in the show notes. So those of you on the YouTube, if you go to livingfreeintennessee.com and click on the show notes, you'll see those links. But you can also go to Amazon and just do a search for them. I don't get any affiliate money, so whatever. Go to Jack Spirko's site, give him the affiliate money. But the Barina lights do a full spectrum light, and you can do a white one or a purple one. And they're inexpensive, they're easy to install, and they work great. And so that combination makes it worth it. And when I think about saving money on seedlings, I also think about a long-term investment in seedling infrastructure. Those lights are an example of that. Or the pots I'm using today, I have all these plastic pots. I have these trays. I bought them, like the trays I bought about 5 years ago, the pots I bought 10 years ago, and I just keep reusing them. They just, this one's starting to look this one had Swiss chard last year. This one's looking a little peaked, and occasionally I need to throw one away, but I've used them for 10 years. And so it's been worth every penny I spent on them to have the kind of pots I want to have. So if you don't have grow lights, just be prepared for the leggy seedlings, or go get them. You can still order them now and get a setup. It works great to just hook them up to a shelf. I use those wire shelves. I have a wire shelf that moves around my house. Now, whether to get the purple or the white, if you're going to have it in your living room, it'll be a little less annoying, in my opinion, if you get the white ones. I have the purple ones. It is going to be in my living room. It is going to be annoying because I had already bought the purple ones, but I have had some experience with the not purple lights now, and they're a little bit nicer if you're not having them in your house. I may eventually move my seed starting rig into the mudroom or into the prepper pantry when those are ready, just so that I don't have to look at the stupid lights. And then if you can spare the extra $10 to $15, buy a timer so the lights are going on and off on a timer, and then you don't have to remember to turn them on and turn them out. So yeah. John Halfley says, I went grow lights mid-sprout last year and smoked everything. You got to be careful about sudden changes to plants. That's absolutely true. And then the grow lights you get do matter. Like those Barina lights do put out some heat. So if you have them in a greenhouse shelf, you may not need anything else for your soil temperature, or you may. It depends on what your ambient temperature is. So that's all of my thoughts on lights. And the second thing is soil temperature matters. Soil temperature, according to the internet, should be between 65 and 75 degrees for germination, right? Right? Well, gosh, it depends on the plant, first of all. And secondly, I've had really good luck at 90 degrees. So my experience does not match what the internet tells me. And also plants don't read books. So I like to keep it between 65 and 90 degrees. I don't want to go too hot or you'll kill the seeds, right? That's what solarization is for. But again, what I like to use are seedling mats. And seedling mats you put them under the tray and you plug them in, and they add, 10 to 20 degrees to the heat underneath. And so if you have them in a 90-degree greenhouse, you're going to kill your plants. If you have them in my 65-degree house, they're bringing it to 85 degrees, and I get great germination rates. That's been those two things. The lights and the seed mats have been the biggest game changers for germination. The seedling mats cost about $25, but again, you're buying one and keeping it forever. I have noticed on the homestead that if we strap them under the rabbit cages on really cold nights and there's babies, the babies stay alive. So I've found other uses for them. If you put them in the rabbit cages, the rabbits eat them. And then you have just wasted $25. If you don't have that, though, your refrigerator usually is warmer on top. There are different places you can get warmth, or just find the warmest place in your house that's not going to dry them out or cause water damage to your hardwood floor, right? You want to be careful about that. And really, in a house, you're going to get, if you're doing them out in the garage and it's 55 degrees, they're just going to germinate way slower. So for me, my time to germination from seed to germination for a tomato is 2 to 3 days. On the packet, let's see what it says. It tells me that this is going to germinate in 7 days. So by having that consistent heat and consistent water, they germinate faster. Peppers, on the other hand, I have them go 2 weeks sometimes. And peppers, what I've found out is if you turn the heat off and on a cycle with the lights, that actually does better. They like to be stressed a little bit to germinate. So every seed's a little different too. So I'm giving you some parameters, but when you get your whatever seeds, definitely check that out. So that's heat. Yeah, John Halfley says they make those mats with thermostats on them so you can adjust. Or you can buy a separate plug-in thermostat that when it senses the air temperature has gotten up to 75 or 80 degrees, it just turns off. I had that when I had my greenhouse. That's how I managed things there, because the greenhouse had a lot more variation in temperature because it was not insulated. That's actually why I started growing my seedlings, or doing my seedlings indoors until they were a certain age before moving them out to the greenhouse. Okay, next. Item 3, consistent watering. You want to keep your soil evenly moist. You do not want it to dry out. You do not want it to become hydrophobic, because then it's an enormous pain in your butt. If it does that, you've got to soak the crap out of it, and you're doing that to your rootlets, and they're not happy either. I like to bottom water. So this tray doesn't have any holes in it for drainage, and I put water in on the bottom, and then it soaks up through the pots. And then before germination, I usually just put saran wrap over the top of this to keep it more humid in there. And then once they germinate, I pull it off. So that bottom watering is how I keep it consistent. And then I check on it once to twice a day. If you have a real job and you're not there to do that, you can actually buy misters that will top water and put them on a timer, and that can help you a lot. So that's a decision you make, setting yourself up for success based on your lifestyle. Am I going to spend less money and do it manually, or am I going to spend more? And then the other thing I will do from time to time, if I feel like I need to, is because I'll just pull one of the pots out and pour water in. But sometimes if it looks like a top water would help the plants, I'll take it to my sink and just not on too high of a water pressure. I'll use the sink sprayer to water them, and realize I'm making enough seeds for our personal use here. So I'm not doing, I'm going to do probably 6 of these trays worth of total plants. I might do 7 or 8. I'm not doing, I used to go on scale and sell basil plants to restaurants in Nashville and other places. Not doing that anymore. So I don't need as much infrastructure in place, which then means I have all of these. No, bad cat. That means I don't have to have as much stuff. So I've actually really reduced the amount of stuff that we have. Overwatering leads to your roots getting rotten and unhappy and damping off. Underwatering can stunt growth, even if it just happens one time that it totally dries out, and it can kill plants. So bottom watering for me is the best because it happens consistently. And then we get to potting mix. If this is your first year, if you're new to this, just buy good quality seed starting potting mix. If you can get organic stuff because you want to keep things organic, great. If not, do what you got to do, because what you're learning this year is a skill. And then you can refine how regenerative you become with that skill. That being said, look for something that is fine textured and bark free, because like any potting soil, they usually have pieces of wood in there and stuff. That's not what you want. You want a seed starting soil, and you want it to be fine and well balanced. And then what you want to do is either find a gardener like me in your area, or if you have a garden already that's kind of doing okay, and this is just your first year starting seeds, and you're like, but I don't want to try to make my own soil, go to your garden, go to the best place stuff grew in your garden, and get about a quart of soil from there that's really good to about this much soil, which is a cement mixing tray, and mix it all in. What you're doing is jump starting that dead soil that you bought at the store with your microbiology from your garden, which can help set things up for success. What I'm doing this year, this is actually soil from the garden right here, and compost that has been developed. Gosh, we've been working on it since last spring, and I'll show it to you. Ugh. And it looks really nice, right? It's crumbly. It holds moisture well. It's got some biochar in there. It's got worm casting tea in there, and it's got some scoops of soil from my actual outdoor garden. And the reason we did that is Tactical let this dry out, and when it dries out, it kills the microbiology. And so I got it undry because it had, in fact, gone hydrophobic. And I then mixed all of these things and let it sort of bake. It's also got some rabbit poop in it, but it's just a nice mix of soil. And I can tell by the consistency, because it's not too chunky or clayey. I can tell it's going to be good for starting seeds by the way it feels. I hope that the microbiology kickstarts I gave it and the biochar will give a little oomph this year. But I learned that trick about the microbiology from, I think it was Steven Reisner, who was like, if you don't have time to go collect IMO, which is the wrong time of year to do that here, indigenous microorganisms is what IMO stands for, then just dig some soil where the garden was good, call it good, but do your best to get something alive in contact with the roots from your seedlings as soon as they germinate, because they're going to be starting to develop the relationships they need with your local microbiology immediately. And if you don't do that right away, they don't develop the same sorts of microbiology. Now, we also have compost tea, and this is a rock, so that's a fail. We'll pull that rock. We have compost tea that we'll water them with, but not every time. I just kind of get it started. And when I go hydroponic instead of soil on seed starting, then I make sure that I'm using, again, water or tea that has been derived from a live thing so that there's some microbiology that gets built into there. So Packrat says, the bride has firmly stated that seed starting and gardening will occur sometime after watering is mapped out and installed. Exactly. The bride is right. I understand. I actually have one semi-automatic watering system in my one raised bed that's ready to go. I've got like 4 more raised beds that need to be finished up that are half full of soil and other things, other augmentations. And we are like kickstarting that into hyper overdrive mode because I want those all up and running by the spring workshop so you guys can see what we did. But we moved the garden this year. So yeah. Coffee and soil. Delicious. Now, last time I did this show, I said, do not mix your first year. Do not mix your own soil unless you know what you're doing. And I am on here to say I was wrong. That is terrible advice. Terrible, terrible advice. What's better advice is this. Experiment with soil by maybe going 50-50 what you've made and 50% of soil that you bought at the store or from somebody like me, or go ahead and go for it with your soil and understand that you might fail this year. The only way you're going to get good at figuring out the right potting soil mix, right, is to start. And it doesn't matter if it's your first year or not. Now, if you want to definitely set yourself up for success, you can do a hybrid model where you start your soil and then you also do like 50% of your starts in commercial soil and see what happens. I have a friend who made her own potting soil, very experienced at it, and had a failed year, and all of her plants failed. And that year, you know what she did? She planted all my extra plants. So having community around you makes that less risky because anybody who knows who starts seedlings is we start more seedlings than we need. And then we end up trying to give them to friends, and then eventually they become compost. So that is part of the cycle of starting your seeds. And at this point, I would say, even if it's your first year, if you have been making your own compost and playing with worm castings and biochar and other stuff, there's no reason not to try to make your own mix. I would buy a good commercial mix if you've never bought one and look at it. Like, get one that's recommended, look at it and try to match that soil consistency because that's probably more important than anything else. Arthur says, I have a great mixture just for tomatoes. Exactly. Some people tailor it to the different plants, and that's great because some, like the environment that some plants want is going to be different than others. Now, let's go to trays and containers. So I'm using plastic trays that are 2 inches deep. I recommend that you get 3 to 4 inch deep trays, but I'm loving the one I'm with right now because I invested these before I had this epiphany. If the trays are a little bit taller, there's more room for root development. And I have found when I accidentally have somebody leave one here for me and I use it, Swiss chard is going in, that I like the deeper trays better. So when these wear out or when I get sick of them, I will replace them. But I saw no reason to spend a bunch of money on new trays when I had perfectly usable trays. The bottom tray has no drainage holes, which works better for bottom watering. It means I don't need to buy a water table. And solo cups, when you need to go to transplant, are cheap and easy to use, and you can just melt a hole in them or drill a hole in them and use them year after year. I have a stack of red solo cups from last year's tomatoes, for example, and plants that are going to be reused because there's no reason to throw them away every year. And that's something that over time you just have to figure out how you're going to store them and that sort of thing. peat pucks, like those little peat things I talked about, they work great for starting, and then you want to get them in soil as soon as the rootlets are starting to get to the edges of the peat, which is almost immediately, by the way. And those, you can just buy them at Walmart or whatever, or any seed supply store. And then they make these pots out of peat. I hate those things. The problem I find with peat is that when it dries out, it's very, very dry. Those peat pots, and what you end up with is soil that's moist inside and pots that are dry on the outside, and then the rootlets touch the pots, and then there's a problem. Now, those things exist under the idea that you can just put the whole pot in the ground. And I know people make egg cartons, paper egg cartons into pots. You can do any of that. I have found anything that dries out, like the paper egg cartons or the peat pots, make it harder to keep consistent with my moisture and have success. And if you end up creating that barrier for the root to get out of the pot into the soil, it's worse than just being very careful taking your plants out of the pots that you're using. Other people don't have my experience, and I applaud them for being way better at this than I am. That's all I can say there. So let me think. Okay, how to choose your seeds. Should you get heirloom or should you get hybrids? What do you guys think? Hi, Sarah. Sarah is her name today and not her farm name. What do you think? Just tell me if you think hybrid or heirloom is better in the comments. Or neither. By the way, as I'm putting seeds into these trays, I'm putting at least, this is Swiss chard, which is my most important thing this year. And I'm putting 2 per thing. And then I'm forgetting where I've already put them. And then I'm putting 2 more per thing. But that's okay. That's just because we're podcasting today. So I don't care which one you get. I am not anti-hybrid seeds. That's not the same as GMO, right? So I will get hybrids if I think they will work. And the way I figure out which varieties I'm going to do is I go, yeah, John is doing mixed. Exactly. I go to the locals who grow things successfully, and I say, what do you use? And then I get my hands on some of the things they use. And then I read the Baker Creek magazine, and I get really excited about stuff like this Brad's Atomic Grape tomato that may or may not do well, and I order them. And I always have some fun things like that ready to go in my seed starting arsenal, because the whole point of doing this isn't just cover my own food. Like, it's also to have fun and grow weird colors of things. And by doing that, I've ended up with some varieties of tomatoes that taste different, but that also are fun to share with people. And some of them do really well in my locality and some haven't. So I say do either, but just know if you're doing the hybrid version, if you save seeds from those, you are not necessarily going to get what went in originally, right? So that's the deal. And we're doing a different kind of Swiss chard here. So I'm going half of the jewel, like the red Swiss chard, and half of this, what is this? Perpetual spinach Swiss chard. Truly a chard, but tastes more like spinach. Yields late spring through autumn. We'll see. I just thought it might be interesting to have something different. Better is, as I said, the best thing to do is ask your locals what grows well, and then what seeds should you start? I start things in the brassica family like broccoli and cauliflower and kale. I'll start those inside, but I'll also try to direct seed them outside. I start Swiss chard inside. I start tomatoes and peppers inside, things that transplant easily. Things I don't usually start inside are root vegetables like beets or carrots, because it's harder to transplant them, and cucumbers and squash and watermelon. Other people do, though. If you're going to start those inside, time it so you can transplant them, excuse me, before they get too big, and try really hard not to damage their roots. Woo! It's a sneezy day today. So that's the advice on what to start there. And then anything that people say is easy to start inside, if it's your first year, start with those. What you want to move towards is getting into a cycle of starting seeds of things you like that you're going to eat and saving seeds from those things so that they adapt to your local environment and your local soil biology. And that's, when Alan's talking about epigenetics, that's part of it. It's like you've got good genetics and then you expose it to your environment, and your environment brings out characteristics of the plant that work for your area. So when you're saving seeds, you're going to choose your most vigorous, awesome plant and save seeds from that. Don't save seeds from a crappy plant, because you're just passing on crappy characteristics for your local area. I don't start peas, beans, carrots inside. I'm actually going to plant my peas, as I always do, on February 1st. I was going to do them in January, but then it got stupid cold here and there was no point. But the peas are going in this weekend. It might not be February 1st, because I think that's Friday. Or if it's Saturday, then I'm doing it Saturday is the day I have planned for that. And I'll probably put out radishes at the same time, because radishes are one of the most gratifying direct sow sorts of crops. So I have this daikon that I'm doing, and then the Chinese red meat looks really interesting. But their time from germination to being ripe is usually about 30 to 45 days. And that makes me super happy. So what does this say? Sprouts in 3 to 6 days. Doesn't say when it's ripe, but it's usually about a month to a month and a half. So I'll do a wave of radishes, and then 2 weeks later I'll do another wave of radishes, near the other radishes, and then 2 weeks later I'll do another wave of radishes until I'm ready to put something else in that bed. And usually I don't grow radishes midsummer. They don't do as well here midsummer. And I'm usually allocating space to other things like green beans and cucumbers in summer. But it's really nice to get some fresh veg off the garden early in the season. So that's my thoughts on just what to grow. Woo, we got the Swiss chard tray done. So what I'm going to do from here, so I put the seeds in. I'm going to water them in after the show, just so I don't make a big mess on my computer. And then I will put them in my seed starting shelf. I'll have it on a timer, and that's pretty much all it takes. So I've gotten one tray done just while talking to y'all. So if it's your first year, choose a couple of things to grow them, and don't stress if you have to buy starts. If it's not your first year, always add things that you love and keep expanding it until you are more self-reliant with your seedlings. Learn how to save the seeds. That's a whole different episode, how to save seeds and different kinds of seeds. Troubleshooting. If you're having trouble with germination on something like cilantro, something you can do is put the seeds in a damp paper towel and put them somewhere warm, like on top of your fridge. Or Jack Spirko puts it on his cable machine for 3 days and check and see if they germinate. And a lot of times they will. Or with your bean seeds, you can soak them overnight before planting them in the ground, and that gives them a boost because they've soaked water up that they don't have to then pull out of the soil. If you do the paper towel trick and they don't germinate still, you may just have bad seeds. Sometimes seeds are bad. It is what it is. So if you want to keep cost down, I think you can source things like these trays from greenhouses. And where is it? There's this tray somewhere. Oh, I wandered off with my other, oh, there it is. So where this is something, this is really cool. So this is a hard plastic carrying tray that I can put this tray in, and it's just there, and then it doesn't break when I'm carrying it. Because if you just carry with the thin plastic tray, so this has the little mesh thing, and then later when the pots are done and they're ready not to be bottom watered, I just put them in this and I can carry them around. And because that's hard plastic, I got this at a greenhouse that was throwing them away. So always check the dumpsters at your greenhouse. If you have a relationship with your greenhouse person, you can say, I'm looking for, pots or whatever. They also replace their greenhouse high tunnel plastic once a year, and that plastic is great for row cover, and it will work for years after that. So that's a really good way to save some money. What other? Attend local seed swaps. So Saturday, February 15th, here from 12 to 3, we have the Homesteaders Alliance meetup for DeKalb County. And we're going to do a seed swap and potluck. So bring seeds to share or get seeds. And in my opinion, if you don't have seeds to share, come anyway and take seeds. We are always so happy for people to get our seeds so that other people have our seeds, so that if we fail our seeds, we have that same seed somewhere else. We've kept, since the death of the person I got the 140-year Timmy seeds from, which was about 6 years ago, a group of us have like banded together to keep growing those tomatoes. And a couple of us have had some hard years with that and then tapped back into the local source for them. So we're still able to keep that going. That's why seed swaps are so cool. And that's why if you don't have one to trade, like most people aren't upset. People who save seeds usually end up with way too many seeds because one plant can give you hundreds of seeds, right? You know, it's funny. I have that tomato packet with 25 seeds and I'll grow the plants off the best plant. I can save 2 tomatoes and have way more than those 25 seeds to get the seeds from. So it's a great way to save money over time and bring your cost down. I spent $65 on seeds this year, which is more than I usually spend because I wanted to try some new varieties from Baker Creek. That was it. And then I haven't been saving my bean seeds. So I keep buying bean seeds in. I should start saving my bean seeds, but I have to shield them from being cross-pollinated by other beans, and I grow multiple varieties. So that's something that I'll put some thought to when I think I need to worry about it, or I'll just get a bunch of weird mixed beans. I don't know. Could do that too. That's you just don't know what you're going to get, and then you're putting garden space in on when you don't know what you're going to get. Not my favorite move with the size. I have my garden's about 25% the size it was last year because of moving its location and going from in-ground growing to raised beds. It's a totally different world for me. I think other than that, I have updated links for the Barina lights, for the seed heating mats and trays. So you can check that out if you haven't gotten your supplies. Again, they will be Amazon links. Look at the thing, look for the best price. I'm not getting any credit from Amazon anyway. I don't care where you buy it. You're not helping me by doing that. If you know another content creator who does, like click on their link first and then go look at those. Any questions from those of you who are live? I don't see a lot of questions, so we're going to wrap up if not. I've been doing my own seeds for more than 20 years, and I've had good years and bad years. And the key is in a bad year, figure out why it was bad. Was it the germination of the seed? Did I not do water right? Did I not do heat right? Did it need some wind? Did I introduce mold into it accidentally by not having properly made soil? Did I put the lights too far away or no lights? Did I have the timer set wrong? There's all these things you can do, but usually what happens with plants in my experience is they just grow. You can mess it up. And if we overly worry about it, we're more likely to mess it up, in my opinion. It's like you might as well just get the thing started, learn from it, and go on with your life. I hope you enjoyed this episode today. If you liked the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at Holler Roast and come to the spring workshop. There might be some of these mugs for sale there. I don't know. And 2, consider becoming a member at livingfreeintennessee.com. Arthur wants to know if I've grown dwarf tomatoes. I've grown such a dwarf tomato that it grows in a pot, and it was alive for 3 years in my kitchen windowsill, and it gave me tiny little tomatoes every so often all year long. I found that with those tomato plants, they're more ornamental than productive. I did get some production off them, and it was kind of cool to have midwinter tomatoes from the windowsill. I could have gotten more by adding more light, because I did have a light over them on that sill for a while. But eventually I killed the plant by not watering it because it was an inside plant. This is why we don't have a lot of inside plants, just my longevity spinach, which will be transplanted out into the garden again at the end of the year or at the end of the winter. But there's no reason not to grow them. If you're interested in dwarf tomatoes, grow them, pot them, sell them to yuppies for lots of money so they can have a tabletop dwarf tomato plant that they can pull from all year long. Like, you can tell the story, and it does happen. It's just that you get like 5 tiny little tomatoes a month or so. That's been and in the summer they produce more. If you have them outside in the summer, they produce more because the growing environment and the light is right for them because, light is part of the formula. I used to do 18 on with light and then the rest of the day off. I've dropped that to 12 and 12 because what was happening is I had these plants used to all the light, put them outside, and they're like, WTF, who took the sun away? And then that would slow them down out of the shoot. So I found, for me, I use 12 and 12, works way better. I do currently have my seed growing rig in my bedroom, and it needs to move out because I don't want to have that light going on and off when I'm trying to sleep. So, which I could program it for. Like I sleep for 12 hours, but inevitably something's going to happen. I'm going to want to take a nap, and then it's going to go tick, and I'm going to be like, dang it. So it's going to come into the living room where my extra firewood stacks by the window, and it will be there until I transplant everything. So it'll probably still be in the window area during the spring workshop because I may or may not have my tomatoes out by then. I may or may not have my peppers out by then, but they're going to be in the process of thinking of wanting to go out. It just depends on how the season goes. Do you need to keep the purple lights real close to the seedlings? Yes. Yep. What you're doing when the seedlings grow is you have the lights close and then they reach up and start touching the light and then you move it up a little and then you move it up a little and that helps make the stems be stockier. And then if you add a little bit of wind to it with a light fan, they have to like fight against that. That's actually pretty good for them too, to build more strength in the stem. I don't have a fan in my system though. I just let them grow how they grow. Hopefully that helps. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you get some seedlings started. I'm going to get the rest of mine done today so that I have my first set of Swiss chard. I'm going to do some lettuce today. And I have fennel because I didn't grow fennel last year and I was really sad about that. So I have Florence to start. And then I will do another round in a week or two of things like dill and basil and other herbs. And then I won't be starting my tomato. I'll start my peppers by mid-February. I won't start my tomatoes until, for me, I won't start my tomatoes until around March 15th to April 1st because I have a hydroponic system and I do a different seedling method for them where I put them in a Kratky hydroponic system and they are gigantic in about 4 weeks. And so I have to be careful about not having too large of tomatoes for transplants. I actually start all of my tomatoes that way and then teach them to be in soil before putting the ones out that go in the soil. And when I do the hydroponic starts, I actually use worm casting tea and compost tea to introduce the microbiology there as well. And that's made a huge difference too. So don't underestimate the power of microbiology. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week.